The minds at Capcom, much like the minds of the Resident Evil's BOW black market, are always hard at work developing the next bioorganic weapons, powerful enough to push your skills as a survivor, and oftentimes downright creepy or strange enough to make you feel pretty uncomfortable about the situation, even if you are armed to the teeth. I mean, giant sharks are one thing, but which twisted individual, not at Tricell, but at Capcom, pitched the half-bat, half-centipede Popo Karamu? Still, for every immortalized Hunter Alpha or Ooze, there's something that didn't quite make the final game. I'm James for First Aid Spray, and this is 15 Cut Resident Evil Monsters. Did you know that of all games, Darkside Chronicles had many BOWs that were designed but never made the final product? The game would have evolved the series staple crow enemy with some kind of infected eagle, known tentatively as the Kidnapper. They would have been as big as the player characters, and perhaps restrained Leon or Krauser, whilst the other had to shoot them off. Another note of the Darkside sketching period is this cheeky but totally not at all creepy chappie, the Laughing Killer. Bearing a strong resemblance to the Hookman from Resident Evil 4's beta, but with bright white eyes and teeth that would have cut through the darkness. He seems almost too scary for a game that essentially amounts to a shooting gallery. Speaking of which, I don't think we need to say too much about the Hookman. Hell, we did a whole podcast on it. But Resident Evil 4 has more cancelled versions than you can shake a pitchfork at, even right up until the final version designs were hitting the cutting room floor. The Ganados in the game had several variations that only made it to the concept art stage, such as female zealots and these ram skull scythe carrying cultists. Our personal favourites? The adorably named Super Dynamite Man and Assassin Bearclaw Man, who combined sound like the protagonist of a late early 2000 Saturday morning cartoon. Another RE4 enemy cut was the Lurching Man, and it's assumed that this creepy jerk was phased out for even creepier jerks, the Regeneradors. As the concept art shows, Lurching Man was able to change shape. This is actually quite similar to a scrapped concept for, all things, the Nemesis. In an interview with Crimson Head, RE3 director Aoyama said that the earliest form of his Resident Evil title featured an enemy that could change shape to slide under the cracks of doors to pursue the player. Terrifying. Resident Evil 0 has a handful of cop monsters that all stand out for different reasons. The one that was perhaps closest to making it to the final game is the DALI, which stood for DNA Arranged Lack of Intelligence. Rude, but considering that the prevailing theory is that it was replaced by the Plague Crawler cockroach enemy, I suppose it was pretty accurate. The reason for this theory is that the piece of music that plays when the person first encounters the Plague Crawlers is titled DALI, so whilst it didn't make the final release, and whilst its creators named it something rather unfortunate, its spirit lives on. Another RE0 creature that was sketched up and never made it very far, presumably because it was difficult to integrate into the gameplay, was the Spider-Man. No, not the bright web-swinging kind, the kind that is one of Zero's two protagonists, mentally controlled by a giant spider latched onto their back, commanding them like a puppet. One single image of this is enough to haunt Resi fans' dreams forever. At this stage, it's pretty common knowledge that the Resident Evil 2 that hit store shelves in 1998 was not the first draft of that game, and to say that it went through major revisions during development would be an understatement, as the game was almost totally scrapped and restarted. Because of this, the next couple of entries on our list actually got further than the concept stage, and there are actual in-game models of them in leaked builds. Sticking with arachnids, we know very little about the origin of our next BOW, but the legend of the man spider lives on as something creepy that we have mixed feelings on about its exclusion. Clearly the RE2 equivalent of RE1's Chimera, they were a fusion of human and spider in a way that science just was not ready for. It's a shame we never got them, but arguments can be made that their removal made room for the Licker as the medium-sized enemy, and well, that went down a treat. The zombie ape is one of the few enemies that never made the jump from RE 1.5 to RE2, and it predates the Eliminator from Resident Evil 0 as the first simian BOWs in the series. There were massive creatures, 3 times the width of Leon, and acted as a surprising mid-boss of sorts before reappearing later in the laboratory. The remake of Resident Evil 2 had its cut creatures right on display in the unlockable artwork section, All on one page we had the Liquor Zombie, a proposed mid-stage of mutation between the two creatures. Cool looking, but perhaps not all that interesting gameplay wise. What is intriguing is the Wheelchair Zombie. We have no idea if this was going to be a one-off enemy like a boss or something reoccurring, but it's certainly a strange and unique looking design. Give this guy a Gatling gun and maniacal laughter and he could be a new Bloodborne enemy in the form of Gabe Newell. And finally we have the hauntingly gaunt and drained looking The Condemned. Whilst the artwork is in the game and visible to everyone, we know absolutely nothing about the ideas behind these BOWs and how they would have been integrated. Resident Evil 5 had a few interesting creatures in the conceptual stage that didn't make the cut. Firstly, the giant wiggly Ouroboros named U11, whose boss fight would have taken place on top of a moving train. Most strikingly, it's also thought that this may have been an alternate mutation for Ricardo Irving. If that's not big or wiggly enough, get a load of U9. Yes, that stick figure represents the player. Oh, you thought that was something? Wait until it stands up straight. Clocking in at over 80 feet tall, it would have been the biggest monster in Resident Evil to that point. Early ideas for RE5 also included the return of the fan favourite Tyrant, a terrific tie-in between Chris and Wesker's original showdown. 2 pages of sketches show completely different designs. One is more what you'd expect, the other seems to be a Ouroboros infected Tyrant. That's entire right side is a man-eating jaw. Imagine the dental bill for that thing. One final enemy that we do know a little about is Richard. In earlier versions of Resident Evil Revelations, Richard was to be an FBC agent that Jill would encounter at sea, much in the way that she does with the late Rachel Foley. It's not known for sure if Richard was outright replaced by Rachel, but it's certainly possible considering that not only does data suggest he was a Stalker-style enemy, but he is very briefly seen in her spot of the game in the E3 2011 trailer. Out of all of these, which would you most like to see make it into a game? And what others that we didn't mention do you like? Let us know in the comments below and subscribe for more Resident Evil content. I've been James from First Aid Spray, and I'll see you next time.